and that's what we are. We have to have a mode of social organization that reflects other values that I think are inherent in human nature that people recognize.
And that would be, I want to see exactly
well,
what you
then,
mean.
I mean, what are human beings? I mean, in your family, for example, it's not the case that in a family every person tries to maximize personal gain at the expense of others, or if they do, it's kind of pathological. It's not the case that if you and I are, say, walking down the street and we see a child eating a piece of candy and we see that nobody's around, and we happen to be hungry, we don't steal it. If we did that, it would be pathological. I mean, the idea of care for others and concern for other people's needs and concern for a fragile environment that must sustain future generations, all of these things are part of human nature. These are elements of human nature that are suppressed in a social and cultural system which is designed to maximize personal gain. And I think we must try to overcome that suppression, and that's in fact what democracy could bring about. It could lead to the expression of other human needs and values which tend to be suppressed under the institutional structure of a system of private power and private profit.
But do you believe that by nature human beings yearn for freedom, or do we settle in the interest of safety and security and conformity? Do we settle for order?
These are really matters of faith rather than knowledge. On the one hand, you have the Grand Inquisitor who tells you that what humans crave is submission, and therefore Christ is a criminal, and we have to vanquish freedom. That's one view. You have the other view of, say, Rousseau in some of his moments, that people are born to be free, and that their basic instinct is the desire to free themselves from coercion, authority, and oppression. It's, the answer to which you believe is more or less where you stake your hopes. I'd like to believe that people are born to be free, but if you ask for a proof, I couldn't give it to you.
You've dealt in such unpopular truths and have been such a lonely figure as a consequence of that. Do you ever regret either that you took the stands you took, have written the things you have written, or that we had listened to you earlier?
I don't. I mean, there are particular things which I would do differently because you think about things, you do them differently. But in general, I would say I do not regret it. I mean,
do you like being controversial?
No, it's a nuisance.
Because this mass medium pays little attention to the views of dissenters, not just Noam Chomsky, but most dissenters do not get much of a hearing in this medium.
No, in fact, that's, again, completely understandable. They wouldn't be performing their societal function if they allowed favored truths to be challenged. Because after all, their role, their very institutional role, is to establish certain truths and beliefs, not to allow them to be challenged.
Society does, in order to cohere, does need a consensus, does it not?
I think it needs tentative assumptions, but we should remember what Justice Holmes said in one of his famous dissents, that fighting faiths have repeatedly been seen to be false. We should recognize that. Yes, we need tentative assumptions in order to continue with our lives, but we also ought to be open to a healthy society would not only tolerate but encourage challenge. That's what happens in the sciences. In the sciences where the world is keeping you honest, and you can't be dishonest, fundamentally, not only is challenge tolerated, but it's stimulated. If a student comes along with a new idea that threatens established beliefs, you don't kick them out of your office. You pay attention, you're struck.
But in politics?
Well, political life is preserving privilege and power, but that's not a value that should be protected. That's a property that should be overcome. I'm not saying question everything always. That's hopeless. You know, like I walk out the door, I don't think the floor is going to collapse. Of course, you accept things. You have faith, you have beliefs, and so on, and you operate on the basis of them. But you should, if honest, recognize that they are subject to challenge, and that if the past is any guide, they're probably wrong, because beliefs have generally been wrong in the past. Also, we just understand more. We understand more about ourselves as history continues. It's hard to look at the 20th century and be an optimist, but still, there's some moral progress in history. Now, take, say, slavery. It wasn't very long ago that slavery was considered moral, not just that we want to do it. The slave owners didn't normally say, look, nice for me, so I'll do it. They offered a moral basis for slavery. Nobody does that anymore. That's an improvement. Just in our own lifetimes, this has happened. Take the issues raised by the feminist movement.
that women do have
Well,
equal rights.
these were
in nature.
things that many people simply did not see 30 years ago. Now, the problems are still there, at least we see them. That's greater insight into our own nature. It's insight, it's discovery of forms of repression and authority that we know we do not accept as moral human beings and that we ought to try to overcome. And I think you can sense such progress. At the same time, you also have decline. I mean, Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia
The
are
genocide of this century, the Holocaust, all
indescribable. So that's why I say it's hard to look at the 20th century and say that you're an optimist.
What about the 21st century?
Well, I don't think we're going to get far into the 21st century unless these problems are overcome, because the problems are no longer localized. I mean, Hitler's genocide was probably the worst moment in human history, but it was still, in a sense, localized. It was a huge massacre, but it was bounded. The problems we're now facing are not going to be bounded. A nuclear war, for example, if there's a superpower confrontation, or even a confrontation among lesser nuclear powers, that's not going to be bounded in any sense that wars were in the past.
Or if we all unplug the environment.
Or if we do not, if we continue to act on the assumption that the only thing that basically matters is personal greed and personal gain, the commons will be destroyed. We didn't have to worry about that too much in the past. It was happening. But now it is clear that they're going to be destroyed. Other human values have to be expressed if we hope if future generations are going to even be able to survive.
From Boston, this has been a conversation with Noam Chomsky. I'm Bill Moyers.